unmute themselves, please, and then I'll click. We're now live, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to this virtual council meeting of Charnwood Borough Council. I would briefly like to run through some housekeeping arrangements. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and the recording will be made available on the council's website following this meeting. In addition, under openness of local government bodies regulations, people may film, record, tweet or blog from only this meeting, and this is outside the council's control. As this is a virtual meeting, it will run slightly differently. Councillors and honorary aldermen, please use the raise hand feature in the participant section of the Zoom software to indicate that you can see and hear the proceedings.
I haven't done that, have I? Oh God, I've not done that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can confirm that, there's a few more people still putting their blue hands up. It seems to have settled. I can confirm that in attendance, we have just missing Councillor Matthew Brooks. And we also have 2 honorary aldermen in attendance. Thank you. Can all the blue hands now be removed? Thank you.
Thank you. Can I now just give you the officers in attendance tonight? They are Rob Mitchell, the Chief Executive, Simon Jackson, the S151 officer, Karen Widdowson, Democratic Services Manager, and Sally Watson, Democratic Service Officer. Tonight, we'll be using the electronic voting system in Zoom. Councillors, when the poll appears on your screen, please select the option indicating the way which you wish to vote. The option are for, against, abstention. The exception in the budget item 6.1, which requires a name vote. So we will be doing a name vote for 6.1. The first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Apologies have been received from councillors. I think Councillor Brooks may be late, and Honorary Alderman Bush, Stott and Tormey. Are there any other apologies? Please raise a hand if there is.
Mr. Mayor, I can confirm that we do not have in attendance Honorary Alderman Day either, so we'll put him in the apologies. Thank you.
Thank you. Move on now to my chaplain, Richard Tatterwee, to say a few words. Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Archbishops of Canterbury and York invited the nation to pray during the month of February, following the announcement towards the end of January of the terrible figure of 100,000 deaths in this country. You may be therefore interested to know, once my 2-year-old daughter has walked away, because you're not invited to this meeting, sorry darling, can you go and find mummy? Sorry, my apologies for that, everyone. It's what happens, isn't it, on live Zoom? But you might be interested to know that therefore people in churches throughout the borough and across the country have been praying for you every Friday. And I just want to pray now, very simply using one of the prayers that we've been given to encourage us to pray for you all. Loving God, at this time of crisis, when so many are suffering, we pray for our communities, for our borough, our region, our nation, and our world. Give our leaders wisdom, our health service strength, and our people hope. Lead us through these parched and difficult days to the fresh springs of joy and comfort that we find in Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much. And delighted the family has get trained already. Thank you. I'll move on to item 2, disclosure of personal interest. I will now call on the Chief Executive to report any disclosures of interest in the business to be considered at this meeting, which have already been made by councillors.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to draw your attention to the requirements set out on the agenda with regards to voting and interest relating to the setting of the budget and the council tax at item 6.1. Section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992 requires that a councillor who owes arrears of council tax which have been outstanding for more than 2 months must declare this at any council meeting which considers the setting of the budget and the council tax, and that they should not vote on those matters. Failing to comply with those requirements, if they apply, is an offence. If this applies to any councillors at this meeting, they are advised to make the required declaration and to leave the meeting during the consideration of item 6.1. It is a requirement of the council's code of conduct for members that the existence and nature of all personal interests be disclosed. Therefore, in the case of item 6.1 on the agenda, it is suggested that members of precepting authorities declare such interests. That would relate to members of Leicestershire County Council, the Combined Fire Authority, parish and town councils. We have already received a number of disclosures and I will now read those out. The following disclosures are all of a personal interest nature, and they are from Councillor Barclay as a member of Leicestershire County Council and Syston Town Council, Councillor Bentley as a member of Leicestershire County Council and the Combined Fire Authority, Councillor Brooks as a member of Thurmaston Parish Council, Councillor Charles as a member of Thurkeston and Cropston Parish Council, Councillor Fryer as a member of Leicestershire County Council, Councillor Gerard as a
I have, Rob, we've lost you. Can anybody hear Rob at the moment?
No.
No.
Do you want me to continue? Would you like me to continue? with
Please, if
reading
you
the
would.
list? Yes.
Karen, thank you.
So we had Councillor Gerard, member of East Goscote Parish Council and Syston Town Council, Councillor Howe of Birstall Parish Council, Councillor Lowe, Chair of Thurmaston Parish Council, Councillor Mear, a member of Leicestershire County Council, Councillor Morgan, a member of Leicestershire County Council, Councillor Needham, Chair of East Goscote Parish Council, Councillor Pacey, member of Syston Town Council, Councillor Parton, member of Leicestershire County Council and the Combined Fire Authority, Councillor Poland, member of Leicestershire County Council, and his wife is a member of Thurmaston Parish Council, Councillor Popley, Shepshed Town Councillor, Councillor Radford, member of Leicestershire County Council and Shepshed Town Council, Councillor Ranson, Barrow upon Soar Parish Council and on the board of the Wellbeing Cafe, Councillor Seaton, Thurmaston Parish Council and a member of Leicestershire County Council, Councillor Shepherd, member of Leicestershire County Council, Councillor Smidowitz, clerk to Samuel Bernard Frost Charity, Councillor Tassell, member of Shepshed Town Council, and finally on my list, Councillor Taylor, member of Leicestershire County Council. Are there any other declarations of interest that need to be declared this evening? Thank you. Can you show your blue hand? Thank you. And if Mr. Mayor can call the names forward.
Could I have Councillor John Savage?
I'd just like to declare Shepshed Town Council. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I can't put my hand, well, I can put my hand up. My apologies, I should have declared an interest. I am a member of Barrow upon Soar Parish Council. I do apologise for the omission.
That's fine. Thank you. Are there any more before I move on? Thank you. I move on to item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. I move that the minutes of the meeting of the council held on the 18th of January 2021 be confirmed and signed as a correct record, subject to Honorary Alderman Robert Shields in attendance. Councillor Baines. I've lost Councillor Baines.
I'm back. Sorry, I second the minutes.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to raise anything on the accuracy of the minutes? If so, please state the minute number.
Mr. Mayor, Karen Widdowson speaking. We just need to pick up that in the attendance. We need Robert Shields, Honorary Alderman Robert Shields needs to be in the attendance list from the minutes of the previous meeting.
I said that.
Did you?
say it.
Apologies.
Yeah. So that's been recorded. So if there's no more, since there's no issues have been raised other than the Robert Shields, please state the minute number. Since no issues have been raised, I take this to signify that the minutes are accepted as a correct record. Thank you. I will now sign the official minutes I have here with me and pass to the Democratic Services Manager in due course for archiving. Thank you. Next item is item 4, announcements. Mayor's announcements. I have the following announcements to make. Firstly, I would like to offer my condolences to the family and friends of Mrs. Margaret Duncan, who served the borough as mayoress between May 1992 and May 1993, and who recently passed away. Margaret's husband, Alistair Duncan, also served as a councillor for 23 years between May 1976 and May 1999, and was conferred as an honorary alderman in June 1999, before sadly passing away in August 1999. Margaret's funeral service will be held at All Saints with Holy Trinity Parish Church, Steeple Row, Loughborough, on Wednesday the 3rd of March at 2:30 p.m. Due to the current pandemic, this will not be or be for close family only. The service will be live and streamed on All Saints Church YouTube channel. As a mark of respect, I next ask you for a 1-minute silence to remember Margaret Duncan, a former mayoress. Thank you. Secondly, as we now approach a year since the first COVID case in the borough, I would like to say a heartfelt thank you to everyone involved in the delivery of the COVID-19 vaccination programme in our borough, from the GPs and the nurses, and to many volunteers who have come forward to help protect many of our residents. Our NHS colleagues have been working around the clock to keep us safe during this pandemic, and we owe them a great deal. I've heard from residents who have had their positive experience when visiting their local vaccination centres, and I would like to encourage people who receive an invite for their jab, please take up the offer. The more people who have the vaccination, the more people we will protect, and the brighter the light at the end of this very dark tunnel. Finally, I would like to welcome Esavi Kossi, a 20-year-old Loughborough University student studying politics and international relations. She has a placement with the Democratic Services team and is watching proceedings in the Zoom environment tonight. Esavi is chair of the Politics and International Studies Policy Committee at Loughborough University and is helping to organise a democracy event which some of our councillors are taking part in. When not at university in Loughborough, Esavi lives in Doncaster and is originally from Togo in Africa. Welcome. I now ask for leaders' announcements. I call on the leader to make an announcement.
Mr. Mayor, I have no announcements to make this evening.
Thank you. And could I call on the Chief Executive to make his announcements?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have no announcements to make.
And thank goodness you're back, sir.
Yes, apologies for that, Mr. Mayor.
Don't worry. The next item is petitions. I understand there's a petition about the Biggin Street public toilets in Loughborough. It's to be handed in virtually. Please can the lead petition member, Councillor Julie Bradshaw, address the council to confirm the title of the petition and a brief description of the petition. Councillor Bradshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I present to Charnwood Borough Council a petition raised by myself and Councillor Mary Draycott in response to the proposed closure of Biggin Street public toilets, Loughborough. The petition has raised nearly 400 signatures so far. Those we have gone through and confirmed that 335 are Charnwood residents, but we believe that figure will increase when we check the remaining signatures. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that. And the petition will be considered and responded to in accordance with the council's petitions scheme. Are there any other petitions to be presented? Right, we'll move on. Item 6, business reserved to council. Item 6.1, 2021-22 General Fund and HRA Revenue Budget and Council Tax. Can I draw everybody's attention to the supplementary report, pages 3 to 67? May I remind councillors that it is a legal requirement that all votes taken on this item, including votes on amendments, must be recorded votes. There is also another slight difference in the procedure for this item, is in that, in addition to the normal rules for the length of speeches, one member of the Conservative group and one member of the Labour group have the right to speak for 5 minutes, rather than the 3 minutes in debating the budget. It would be helpful if councillors exercising this right and the councillors proposing amendments could indicate that they are doing so at the beginning of their speech. I call on Councillor Barclay to propose the item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, to ensure that the necessary finance is available to carry out services in 2021-22 and to set the council tax, I move recommendations 1 to 17 on pages 2 to 9 of the supplementary report for the reasons for each of the recommendations, which are on pages 9 and 10 of the supplementary report. Further, Mr. Mayor, I will be exercising the 5 minutes on behalf of the Conservative group.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I second this item and reserve my right to speak.
If any councillors would like to speak, please press the raise hand feature in Zoom. I have one councillor, Councillor Jill Bolton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm speaking on behalf of the Labour group and I will be taking the 5 minutes allocated for my speech. Firstly, I'd like to sincerely thank the lead member and officers for all of the hard work they've put into preparing this budget in the uncertain times that we're living through. It's not an easy task to prepare such a budget with the many uncertainties we're currently facing. There is no doubt that COVID-19 has had a profound impact on all of our residents, and we need to seriously consider this when deciding on whether or not to approve this budget. However, we must also take account of the fact that COVID-19 has impacted the income of Charnwood Borough Council and therefore the services that we're able to provide. We have suffered through 10 years of austerity, and this has only been made worse by the pandemic. At the start of the pandemic, assurance was given to councils by the government that additional costs incurred would be fully funded. This has not been the case to date. We still don't know about further funding to support the council in the extended period of COVID-19, which is why there are many uncertainties in the budget and the capital plan. This budget is not about our council, the Labour group, or even the Conservative group. Above everything else, it's about our residents. People who have been struggling throughout with furloughing, losing their jobs, homeschooling, feeding their families, and particularly the mental health issues that many are now facing and will continue to face for the foreseeable future. Over the period of COVID-19, almost 2 million people across the country have been unemployed or fully furloughed for at least 6 months. Many of these are Charnwood residents. And this does not include the self-employed people who have been excluded from government funding through no fault of their own. It was reported this afternoon in Parliament that there are around 3 million people in this situation. And we also need to bear in mind that while on furlough, people are only paid 80% of their wage, which is very hard for those who are already struggling financially. Food bank usage has increased by almost 50% since the pandemic began. And this is for parents and carers who need to feed their children. I'm regularly contacted by residents at weekends who have no food to feed their families and no access to either funding or a food bank for a couple of days. The Guardian reported on Friday last week that 1 in 6 universal credit claimants are forced to skip meals. This includes many who were forced to claim universal credit for the first time during the pandemic and have been unable to eat nutritious meals or pay their bills. They have found the payment inadequate to meet basic living costs without borrowing money or using food banks. And yet, we're now expecting our residents to pay for promises from the government that have not yet been fulfilled. It is simply wrong to shift the responsibility for funding our council onto the already overburdened backs of our residents with year-on-year council tax increases and potentially reduced services. We need fair funding from the government rather than relying on residents to plug the gaps. For many of us at this meeting, the proposed increase in the council tax for Charnwood may seem small, but it's yet another financial challenge for many of our residents. I have residents in my ward who were already struggling financially before the pandemic, and this will hit them badly. Council tax for a Band D property will be increasing for 2021-22 by around 5%. And I'm fully aware that much of this rise comes from the county, the police, and the fire authority, which are not under the control of our council. But surely we could, at the very least, have retained council tax at the current rate to acknowledge the severe financial hardship that many of our residents are facing. Due to the nature of the times we're living through, there are many uncertainties in the proposed budget, understandably, and there need to be contingency plans in place in case the anticipated income, such as that for the new homes bonus, does not crystallise. Once again, I'd like to thank the lead member and the officers for all of the work they've done, but despite this, the Labour group will be voting against the budget for the reasons that I've already mentioned. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's the end of what I have to say.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Could I go to Councillor Hilary Fryer, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I will say my normal things, that I would like to thank everybody, that's all the officers and all the councillors and also the Cabinet, for doing such a sterling job during this last year. I don't think there are many of you here that can remember what it was like in 2007. We had no reserves, our housing stock was disgraceful, and this was up, and we came in with nothing. Imagine what it would have been like this past year if we hadn't had reserves, if we hadn't had balances and possibility, if we hadn't taken every opportunity to ensure that all the residents in this borough had the best services we could possibly give them. Zero council tax increase does not help people. And I think if we work out, and I'm sure my colleague, Mr. Councillor Barclay and Councillor Morgan will explain what exactly a 5% increase is. It's roughly, I think, approximately about £5 or £6 a month. That is barely 2 cups of coffee, and it is certainly not a packet of cigarettes. We've all had to fill in our horns. We've all had to work hard, but I am exceptionally proud of what this administration has achieved in the last year, and I will wholeheartedly be supporting this budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Get my screen right. Katrina Goddard, Councillor Katrina Goddard. Thank you.
Thank you. Like Councillor Bolton, I was saddened to see that during this very difficult time for many, we would be asking residents to pay more, whilst receiving about £5 million less in government grants than we did in 2013-14. I sympathise with the position that the members of the Conservative group find themselves in when the national government continues to reduce support for local governments. However, asking residents to carry this burden at this time is not the right approach. Whilst an extra £5 a month may seem manageable for some, as has been stated already, for many it is a tipping point for those struggling after almost a year of only 80% of their usual wage, or less for those who have lost income and have been entitled to little or no help at all. Just for some clarity, whilst I don't know what cups of tea you'll buy for £5, but £5 also the equivalent of 50 nappies, which for a struggling young family is actually very, very difficult. If you are in that position, £5 is a lot of money, not just 2 cups of tea. In a recent councillors' briefing, it was suggested that the council may struggle to support all of those who are entitled to council tax relief. With this in mind, I would like to confirm all of those entitled to council tax relief will receive their full entitled support. I'd also like to ask what more this council will be doing to lobby the national government for more support for local government so that residents will not be asked to pay even more.
Thank you. Could I now go to Councillor Lee Harper-Davis, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. After listening to Councillor Bolton's comments, I'm not quite sure. There was quite a few comments in there that I didn't find really relevant to really what we're discussing. And I think it's £5 per year, not per month. So just to clarify that, and I'm very proud, and I know how hard our officers have worked. Obviously, Tom's worked with them, and I think it's commendable on what we've done. And all of the time, we're not knowing really what government funding we were getting. So to do what we've done and not to affect the services is highly commendable. And I'm so very sad that in general, from a political perspective, as councillors from on the other side of the bench, you don't find it in your heart to actually vote for this budget. I think it's commendable to do what we've done. And from a food poverty perspective, we've had the community action group. We've helped as many people as we can. And I think it's quite shameful that you don't support it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Could I call on now Councillor Ted Parton?
So, as human beings with consciences, which we all are, because we're all servants of our residents in Charnwood, of course we don't want to put any further financial burden on any of our residents. But crucially, one of the most interesting things to look at in the paper is what the lead member has written in his introductory notes. And what I've done here is I've printed them off and amalgamated them, and it gives you a very concise list of the issues that we're facing. But it also reassures us that we are in 21 to 22, 22, 23 and 23 and 24, we will be using our reserves because we are attempting, whilst lobbying national government, to balance our books, but crucially, to protect the most vulnerable in our borough. Now, I want to leave you with three figures, if I may. During the months of July 2019 to 2020, Charnwood Borough Council, that formed the Charnwood Community Action, we helped provide food to over 3,962 local people and families. And we also supported 18 local community organisations. And we have delivered over that period of time, so bear in mind that only went to January, we delivered over 10,000 food parcels during lockdown. For anybody that is experiencing food poverty, we have a solution, and we absolutely must deal with everybody that comes forward, and we will do that. The second thing to say is that the fire authority have been mentioned in the council tax bills. I can tell you, as a member of the fire authority, we are the lowest funded in England, and yet we are still rated good. And we talk about food parcels. Our firefighters, our men and women in service, are actually delivering these food parcels. And thirdly, in terms of the council tax rise for the county section, a lot of that is to support adults and communities and children and families who are the most vulnerable.
30 seconds left.
Who are the most vulnerable in Leicestershire and Charnwood. We've balanced the books, but at the same time, whilst taking painful decisions, we are protecting the most vulnerable, and that has got to be the number one priority.
Thank you. Could I now turn to Councillor Roy Rollins, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think a lot of the Labour Group speech so far has been directed towards the national government and hasn't focused very much on what we're presenting tonight as a budget for Charnwood Borough Council. And I think it's important not to lose focus on exactly what we're here to do, and that's to vote on a budget for our council. We are not the government. We're not setting the government's budget. There has, of course, been significant government support during the pandemic. I think Councillor Harper-Davies has clarified quite nicely, but the increase that we're talking about for our council equates to £5 per year, or 9.6 pence per week. As Councillor Parton's just spoken about, during the pandemic, Charnwood Borough Council have done a huge amount for residents. There's been a massive amount of support for individual residents, but also the teams have worked incredibly hard in difficult circumstances to ensure that business grants have been getting out to businesses very quickly, to make sure that any grant funding available is really channeled to the right places to help our residents. There's been a huge amount of support, and we can't let that go. In addition to all of that, we've been rapidly increasing our commercialisation to plug some of the gap without having to go to our residents and ask for help. So this is what we consider a very fair proposal. It does of course cost people more money, but it's quite small in the scheme of things and considering the benefits that people get from our council. I think what's notable is there are absolutely no suggestions from Labour as to what services they would cut in order to keep our council tax at the same level as it is now. I think you've got to really come up with sensible and credible alternatives if you're going to criticise and actually vote against a budget. And all we've heard tonight is comments on national government. There's nothing actually as to suggestions for how we can make a change and how we can cut different services in order to keep things going. Actually, what you see is a very measured and a very balanced budget that I would absolutely commend to this council, and I will certainly be voting in favour. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Could I go now to Councillor Daniel Grimley, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is a budget that does balance the books in difficult circumstances. I think Councillor Rollins has picked up on the point I was going to make, is that we're getting told that that they're saying it's too high, the council tax. But I'd like to know where can we make these savings from the Labour Group? They're not putting anything forward. They've had a long time over the budget scrutiny to put things forward, have things discussed, but we just haven't seen this. I think it's a bit frustrating. There's no real substance to what they're putting out. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Christine Harris. Can't hear you at the moment, Councillor Harris. I'll tell you what, I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Jenny Boker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say that I thought Councillor Rawlins summed it up very adequately in that as far as Labour is concerned, I can't hear anything substantial from them as to how they would do anything different. I think we've done an excellent job during the last year, and we've tried to save money where we can save money, where it's feasible, and we've done a lot of things to, as Councillor Rawlins said, to plug the gaps where there are gaps. And we can go on out of COVID in a fairly solid financial situation. So to go on about £5 a year increase that is going to affect families terribly is just ridiculous, because the queue at McDonald's last week on drive-through was substantial. So, you know, what's £5 a year? Sorry, but it's just a ridiculous argument. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to James Poland first before coming back to Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Responsible administrations have to make difficult decisions. I've been on Cabinet now since 2015, and that fact has always shone through. It's easy to criticise, it's easy to sit on the side sniping, but the reality is that this is some of the most difficult times local government has faced, certainly in my lifetime, and I would argue in living memory. Given the circumstances in which we find ourselves, this administration has made those difficult decisions. We've managed to present a good budget in very difficult circumstances. And actually, I've yet to hear anything from the opposition that criticises our budget. It's been national politics. It's all been about the government. This is about us for the residents of Charnwood here. And actually, no one that I've heard yet has spoken against our budget. So let's, national politics aside, let's do what's right for our residents. And our residents are best if we have a budget that passes. If we vote against this budget, if we vote this budget down, councils can and do go bust. And that is how that happens, by dodging those important decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Try and go back to Councillor Christine Harris, if I could.
Can you hear me now?
Well, I can, loud and clear,
Oh,
Councillor Harris.
heavens.
So, where you go?
Oh, God, I'm hopeless. But I wanted to say something about what Hillary said. I've always had the greatest respect for Hillary, but she said you can only buy 2 cups of coffee for £5. Where I live, there would be single mums being able to feed 2 or 3 kids on £5. You don't know the deprivation. I can see. I'm watching you, Hillary. You don't know what I have to deal with here in my patch, and these people. And it isn't the single people. It's often their mums or dads saying, "Can you please help us?" And they aren't, because some of these people are working, Hillary, and they still have kids. 2 cups of coffee for £5. That is outrageous. I'm sorry. Can we keep this? Can we discuss this at that sort of level? Because in parts of our community, people are suffering because they don't have enough, even to put food in their mouths, let alone 2 cups of coffee. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I now go to Councillor Jenny Tillotson, please?
Thank you. this pandemic has been really divisive. Some people are actually better off, aren't they? Because they've been able to work, but they've not had things to spend money on, not being able to go out, not being able to go on holiday. But for others who've not been able to work through no fault of their own, they are really, really struggling. Some of them, yes, using food banks before. They were probably contributors to food banks, but now they have to use food banks. And I think just some acknowledgement that some people are desperate, and an additional £5, as Councillor Harris has just said, will feed a family. It's not a couple of cups of coffee. It's not a trip to McDonald's. It's desperate for some people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The final speaker I've got on my list, after that, saying that, I have a few more, which is Councillor Mary Draycott.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's important this report is actually put into some context, because it's not the pandemic alone that is responsible for the serious financial situation we're facing. 10 years of conservative austerity cuts to services is the background we find ourselves in. 12 months ago, our lifeline was then to invest in commercial property to gain revenue. It's very clear that had there been no austerity, this council and all other public services would have been better placed last year. My next point is, yet again, taxpayers and tenants are paying more, but continue to get less for it. 1.6 million cuts proposed, 847,000 of reserves, transfer of business rates and more in order to balance the budget. Sadly, it will mean that jobs and posts are lost. And for staff that have gone the extra mile last year, that is very, very bad news. Next, I'd like to just mention one of the cuts that is being proposed in the budget. And I do have a suggestion. It's to do with the amalgamation of public toilets. At the LAC meeting, it was agreed by all members that because there was an underspend of £6,500, it be used to mitigate this cut, this closure. I see no mention of that or of Cabinet's comments in this report. Such a short-sighted cut, and yet later in the report, at the back, which you might not have seen on page 33, it actually means a loss of £18,000 income per year for closing that public convenience, which is actually a greater loss than what it's costing to close it. The people of Charnwood have made their views on this closure very clear, and indeed in the report it's touched on with the online budget consultation and the business ratepayers meeting it was raised. Finally, to end, Mr. Mayor, a question. Where is the budget scrutiny panel report in this report to Cabinet? Each year, the chair takes its recommendations to Cabinet, and it is always reported in full to this meeting. One of the recommendations did not need to go to Scrutiny Commission, but the other several were all budget related, yet they are not even mentioned in this document tonight. So, Mr. Mayor, I would welcome Cabinet considering not closing the toilets. You have an option. I've given you reasons and ways to do that, but I would love to know why budget scrutiny work has been ignored.
Time is up.
And is not in this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Could I go now to Councillor Emma Ward, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would actually like to make a comment on the budget as shadow spokesperson for climate change and carbon management. I notice in here that we have another reduction in the environmental communications and environmental projects grant. It's a significant reduction. And this comes after reductions to the carbon neutral budget as well, which were also significant. obviously, we're facing financial pressures, as are all councils at this time. But I am extremely concerned about the impact that these cuts are going to have on our ability to reach our carbon neutral targets. So I just wanted to ask how our programme is going to be successfully implemented on this new significantly reduced budget. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. Could I go now to Councillor Jamir, please? Jill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think, if anything, this meeting was brought out is the contempt that the Conservative Party have for local, ordinary, hardworking people. I'm not sure if members realise, but this has been live streamed on YouTube, and I'm sure some of these people, anybody watching this, will be horrified to know that talking about people queuing at McDonald's or buying a couple of cups of coffee and talking down to them is what Conservative councillors at Charnwood seem to be doing to justify their increase in council tax. And it's absolutely shameful. I'm ashamed to be a part of this council when Conservative members talk about our general public like that. But putting that to one side, let's get on to this budget. Somebody asked, I think Councillor Poland, we haven't talked about this budget. Well, let's talk about this budget, which isn't balanced. If it was balanced, you wouldn't be using £850,000 out of reserves. A balanced budget is where your income and your outgoings are pretty much equal. Let me remind members here, 3 or 4 years ago, 3 years ago, I think, our reserves were in excess of £11 million. At the end of this budget, they're forecast to be less than 6 million, 5.7 million if you look at the figures. We're looking at reductions from central government on new homes bonus of £1.8 million. I can't remember the exact figure here. That's a huge decrease that they're giving us at a time when it's so uncertain, funding is so uncertain. Councillor Bolton did say at the beginning, Robert Jenrick said to councils, spend what you need in this pandemic. And guess what happened? He didn't stay true to his word. And is that any surprising? He's a Conservative member of state. And we know exactly how unlawful those members of state are being. But coming back to this budget as well, £5 increase, 5% increase, 3.6% increase. Regardless of what the increase is, it is an increase at a time when people are financially strained. We will hear in the next couple of months how many more people are applying for council tax support in the council. Furlough is going to end. Businesses aren't going to go back to normality. Employment isn't going to be at 100% as it is. So over the next 3 or 4 months, a lot more people will be more financially constrained. But guess what? In April, for April, they are going to get a council tax bill that is near 5% more than what they were paying last year. And I don't think, it doesn't matter which party that you belong to, residents don't see that way. Residents think actually their bills are going up. Brown bins are going up. You know, everything
30
is
seconds left.
up. And I don't think that is a correct way of doing it. We could have made a statement. We could have said, actually, it's £5 a year. We don't need to raise that from our residents. Let's give them a break for that 1 year, borrow a few more £1,000s from reserves and give them a break. And we could have made that choice and that decision, but you didn't. You've decided to go with what your national party has said, 5% increase. And we've had it from every Conservative authority in Leicestershire, that 5% increase.
Time up. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got 2 more speakers. I'll close the debate down then. Councillor Alice Brennan.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to raise a concern regarding the HRA account. Now, we know that we have been unable to spend money in the budget this year to the amount that's been allocated for repairs and maintenance due to many factors this year. Some of those factors will be ongoing, whether it is to do with the pandemic or other factors related to repairs. And I would like to know whether the amounts that have been allocated for repairs, whether it's realistic that we will be able to spend that during this year, or whether it may need to be temporarily allocated elsewhere and also consideration given to future years when there will undoubtedly be catch up that needs to be done, and how we are going to budget for that going forward to increase year on year to ensure that repairs are caught up with, but the amount of money allocated to them is realistic, especially during these difficult times. Thank you.
Thank you. And go to the final speaker, which is Councillor Richard Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I find it interesting that the Labour, the leader of the opposition, sort of goes on about trying to have a balanced budget and not using reserves, and yet at the end of his speech decides that in order to create a balanced budget, we should be using more reserves. So I'm not quite sure of where he's going with that one. The fact that we do have reserves in the first place is thanks to a good administration for the last 10 years. Having not had any reserves prior to that, thanks to the previous administration. I just find it interesting that there is very little alternatives been put forward by the Labour group, and that their default is to just criticise national policy and not look at local policy, which is what we're here to discuss tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Can I go now back to Councillor Morgan, who reserved his right?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much for all of those who contributed to this debate. Look, setting the council tax each year, setting the budget each year, it is incredibly important. It's the most important part of our role as councillors within our meeting cycle. Unless we have a set budget, we can't do anything. We can't support our residents, we can't support our local businesses. And I have to say, this year has been an extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary year, not only for all of us individually, all of our residents, but for our businesses and also for us as a local authority, for a council of our size to take on the role that it has within our community to serve our residents, businesses in a way that it has been extraordinary. We can't get over that. This has been a once in a lifetime experience. This is not a normal year. And as a result, next year will not be a normal year either. But we have done some extraordinary things this year. Councillor Parton mentioned the 10,000 food parcels, the fact that we are supporting the most vulnerable in our society. Councillor Harper-Davies mentioned again about the support that we've given to our residents. It's absolutely right to highlight that the £5 increase that is being proposed is per year. It's not per week, it's not per month, it is per year. As much as we regret having to raise our council tax at all, as Councillor Bailey correctly pointed out, the logic of not raising a council tax, but then complaining about having to draw from reserves to balance the budget. The alternative, and Councillor Draycott mentioned this, the alternative would be having to cut services and staffing levels. Well, actually, we don't think that that's the way to support our residents and our businesses. We want to carry on supporting them as effectively as we can. And that means that we do have to transition as an authority. Not only do we have a bold and ambitious plan to be carbon neutral by 2030, but along with that, we also have a series of transitions that we have to go through as an organisation. And actually, the past year has demonstrated that we are able to do things differently and operate differently to make sure that we become more efficient and more supportive of the key parts of our community. So this is going to be a challenging year coming up as well. This budget is a challenge. The next few budgets, as the medium-term financial strategy demonstrate, are going to be challenging. Councillor Barclay works ferociously hard with the officer team, who I have to say have been extraordinary through this past 12 months. We are very lucky to have them in the way that they've supported our community. But it is going to be an extraordinary tough year to come. So I commend this budget to the whole council. I hope that actually all members will be able to support this budget, because I think fundamentally, I think all of you accept that this is actually the only way of actually getting through the coming months. So please, I urge you all to support it, work with our officers, work with our council to make sure that we support our residents and our businesses as effectively as possible, because there is only way forward, and this is the way to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I now call on Councillor Barclay to sum up, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've faced a year of immense challenges on all fronts, during which this council, its officers and councillors have shown resilience, adaptability and courage to enable us working together to maintain services during the pandemic. And we have also provided grants to our residents. It's worth bearing in mind that we've distributed £43 million worth of grants to businesses throughout the borough. Working with Community Action Charnwood, we have distributed since the beginning of the pandemic 20,000 food parcels across the borough to the most vulnerable and those most impacted by COVID-19. All areas of the council have met the challenges. The corporate services team have been outstanding, with the finance team finding savings of over 2 million within the budget. Our strategic director of commercial development has raised £1.466 million in commercial income, which, after allowing for the minimum reserve provision, interest charges and portfolio management charge, leaves us with 650,000 for the general fund and 367,000 towards a reserve to meet any rental voids or any problems we may meet in the future. Despite substantially reduced levels of income, we have produced a sound budget which allows us to continue to provide excellent services to all our residents and offers hope for the future as we emerge from the pandemic over the next 4 or 5 months. All of the directorates, housing, planning and regulatory services, have met the challenges presented during the last year and ensured that essential services are delivered in a COVID-free, compliant way, and that the housing needs of residents are met. All officers across the board working together have achieved this outstanding result, which this time last year, if I'd come before council to tell you what was going to happen and the changes and adaptability that our officers and council would have to show and still maintain services, I don't think anyone would have believed me. There certainly is good reason to be hopeful for a much better future, despite the uncertainties. This is a sound budget where we are asking residents to pay 9.6p a week, 9.6p a week extra to maintain the services. We will at the end of the budget have 5.7 million in reserves. Whatever the future may hold, we have proved beyond doubt that Charnwood will deliver, it does care, and this administration serves its residents, and we stand together with them no matter what the adversity we meet. The budget and MTFS have been thoroughly scrutinised, and I welcome the input. I would urge you to support our borough, our communities, by voting for this budget to enable us to serve all residents. No alternatives have been put forward. Concerns have been raised about the housing revenue account. It's sound. There is enough money to carry out any repairs going forward. I've answered the one about the council tax is 9.6p a week. There isn't a lot to be fearful for. There are uncertainties, but every council is facing uncertainties at the moment. The country is facing uncertainties. You know, the level of debt is 400 billion as we try to support all the residents and the whole nation. Let us not forget that this council, I'm not talking about government, has also produced a vaccination centre which will help our residents to retain health and be able to work afterwards. It has been a shocking year, but financially we have emerged from it stronger, and we have the right things in place to serve our residents, and we continue to adapt as we go forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have nothing further to add. I commend this budget to council.
Thank you. I'm now putting the motion to the vote, and we'll ask the Chief Executive to call out the names of each councillor so that they vote can be recorded.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I will now read out the name of each councillor. Please declare if you are for, against or abstaining. So Councillor Richard Bailey.
For.
Councillor Paul Baines.
For.
Councillor Tom Barclay.
For.
Councillor Ian Bentley.
For.
Councillor Jenny Boker.
For.
Councillor Paul Baldwin.
Against.
Councillor Jill Bolton.
Against.
Councillor Simon Bradshaw.
For.
Councillor Julie Bradshaw.
Against.
Councillor Alice Brennan.
Against.
Councillor Matthew Brooks.
I think I'm going to have to abstain just because I wasn't here for the entirety of the debate, although I'd happily support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Roy Campsell. Councillor Campsell. I will come back to you, Councillor Campsell. Councillor John Capleton.
For.
Councillor Mark Charles.
For.
Councillor Lee Harper Davis.
For.
Councillor Mary Draycott.
Against.
Councillor Sandy Forrest.
Against.
Councillor Hilary Fryer.
For.
Councillor Sue Gerard. Councillor Gerard.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Kat Goddard.
Against.
Councillor Daniel Grimley.
For.
Councillor Leon Hajai Nicolau.
For.
Councillor Colin Hamilton.
Against.
Councillor Keith Harris.
Against.
Councillor Christine Harris. Councillor Christine Harris.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Julian Howe.
For.
Councillor Jane Hunt.
For.
Councillor Mark Lowe.
For.
Councillor Paul Mercer.
For.
Councillor Jewel Mear.
Against.
Councillor Jonathan Morgan.
For.
Councillor Paul Murphy.
For.
Councillor Laurie Needham.
Against.
Councillor Ken Pacey.
For.
Councillor Andy Paling.
For.
Councillor Jeff Parsons. Councillor Parsons.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Ted Parton.
For.
Councillor James Poland.
For.
Councillor Robin Popley.
For.
Councillor Christine Radford.
For.
Councillor Pauline Ranson.
For.
Councillor Shona Rattery.
For.
Councillor Roy Rollings.
For.
Councillor John Savage.
For.
Councillor Brenda Seaton. Councillor Seaton.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Shepherd.
For.
Councillor Margaret Smidowitz.
For.
Councillor David Snart.
For.
Councillor Joan Tassell. Councillor Tassell. You there, Councillor Tassell? Thank you, Councillor Tassell. Councillor Deborah Taylor.
For.
Councillor Jenny Tillotson.
Against.
And Councillor Emma Ward.
Against.
Thank you. I think Councillor Roy Campsell, did you want to just indicate if you are there, if you wish to vote, please?
He needs to unmute.
Councillor Campsell, can you put your response in the chat, please? Oh, you got a thumbs up, so that's a 4.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Campsell. I couldn't see, but I can now. I can notice that. So that's a vote for the motion. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think my colleagues have been keeping score.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive. And I wait now for Simon Jackson to give us the detail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I make that 37 for, 13 against, with 2 abstentions.
Could I call on Karen
Can I
Widdowson?
confirm that? Thank you.
Thank you. That's fine. Thank you. Could I then say the motion is carried? Thank you. And move on to item 6.2, capital strategy, treasury management strategy, annual investment strategy and minimum revenue provision policy. I call on Councillor Barclay to propose the item.
Mr. Mayor, for the reasons set out in the report, I move recommendations 1, 2 and 3, also set out in the report.
Thank you. Councillor Rollins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I second this item and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. If any councillors would like to speak, please press the raised hand feature in Zoom. Right, I've got one councillor, Councillor Paul Baldwin. We can't hear you. We can't hear you. You're muted. That's right.
Okay.
Lovely.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Start again.
Okay. As 22.7 million has been spent buying the existing property portfolio, the papers before us make it clear that this has come from existing council funds through reductions in the capital spend shown on page 39 of the capital strategy, which shows that the capital spend will reduce from 66.4 million in 2021 to just 10 million in 22-23. Consequently, it would be helpful to know whether the huge cuts in capital projects will benefit Charnwood in the long run and the impact it will have on future budgets.
Thank you. I've got one more speaker, which is Jill Mayer. Councillor Jill Mayer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to add on to that point. We all knew that the government was looking at restricting in councils for accessing or investing in commercial property. They haven't got that far. They've restricted us from borrowing from the Public Works Loan Board. So I just wanted to know when the decision was made to borrow near £22 million, near £23 million internally, as opposed to actually accessing the cheap loans, money available from the Public Works Loan Board, that is now no longer available to us. So I just wanted to see if the lead member could clarify when that decision was made and why it was made to borrow so much internally. But then the second question is that, well, we haven't got access to that money now, that cheap money anymore. So whatever we do borrow, if it is for to offset this commercial, we'd have to rejig our budgets and borrow piecemeal from the Public Works Loan Board, or if we're borrowing a full 20 million, we'd have to borrow it from elsewhere at a higher rate, so the margin of interest will be greater. So that does put us into a less disadvantage. So I just wanted to clarify that, and if there are any written correspondence that you could send us to back up that up. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no other speakers on the list with a raised hand. So I go back to Councillor Rollins, who reserved the right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nothing further to add following that discussion.
Thank you. To call on Councillor Barclay to sum up, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The capital strategy is very clearly laid out. There's an amazing amount of detail within it. As you'll be aware, we have plans going forward to invest 15 million in the Loughborough Enterprise Zone, 0.8 million in a training and skills hub, and 15 million in the Loughborough Town deal. As regards the commercial investment, that has been brought forward and made available to every councillor as and when every property was bought, together with a complete working of how we were going to fund it, which was through internal borrowing. We hold balances of roughly 60 million, and the whole thing has been laid out for everyone to see quite clearly. So as far as the timing, you've already had the information, you know the workings of it out. we have a sound capital strategy going forward. The reason it's probably is that we have got a lot of capital expenditure coming up. We aren't committed to it, but we've made provision for it, and that will help the council lift out, the council and the borough lift out of the pandemic and the economic damage that has done. So there's a huge amount of information all about the economic summary, and I commend it to councillors to read it in detail and follow their papers, and they'll know exactly what's going on, and there is nothing to hide, and I'm really quite proud of what we have done. So I urge you to vote for this. I've nothing further to add.
Thank you. Could I now put the motion to the vote? Councillors, when the electronic voting poll will appear on your screen, please select the option indicating the way in which you wish to vote.
Right. Polling is about to open. I'm just about to open it now. Thank you.
Should be asking you verbally.
I will wait exactly 1 minute for the polling to end. We have just less than 30 seconds left.
Could you?
Okay, all right, I'm going to end the polling and display results. Now, I do understand that Councillor Bentley has IT problems, so he needs to physically say which way he's voting so we can add him to the results. So if I share the results now, first of all, Councillor Bentley, can you just confirm which way you would vote, please, and then we can add that number.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. I vote for.
Okay. So on that basis, we have 38 for, and we've got 14 against, which makes 52 councillors. Simon Jackson, please, can you just confirm that as well?
I think that's abstain, Karen, not against.
Oh, it's abstain, sorry. Yes, it is. 14 abstaining, sorry.
Could you just confirm that, Mr. Jackson, Simon Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Apologies, I had a bit of internet instability there, but the results are 38 for and 14 against. Sorry, 38 for, 0 against and 14 abstentions.
Okay, the motion then is carried. Thank you.
And
could I just go back to the actual result of 6-1? There was I saw it come up on the chat that
I
the figure might
apologize.
have
36, 14, and 2 is the actual split there. I counted wrong when we went back, so I made an error there. But it's 36, 14, and 2 is the actual correct answer. So apologies to all.
Thank you, and thank you for the councillor who brought that up. So we're actually right now in terms, but it doesn't affect the result. Thank you. Item 6.3, Treasury Management Mid-Year Review for the 6 months ending 30th September. I call on Councillor Barclay to propose the item.
Mr. Mayor, for the reasons set out in the report, I move that the mid-year review of the Treasury Management Statement, prudential borrowing and Treasury indicators, plus the annual investment strategy as set out in Part B of the report to Cabinet attached as an annex be noted.
Thank you. Councillor Bowker.
I second this, Mr. Mayor, and reserve my right to speak.
If any councillors would like to speak, please press the raise hand feature in Zoom. Councillor John Mayer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think reading the report, it is historical. We don't know the economy is tanking and under severe pressure, but markets are buoyant because of all the capital expenditure, all the money that's been pumped into the economy. But what I want us to do, and maybe look at this through scrutiny and future, is look at ways that we can help local businesses. I understand we've distributed so much because national government has given us to local businesses, but that will eventually stop. And we've got a big pot of money here, and we should look at how we can support local businesses across Charnwood when national government money ceases. See if there's a small pot of money that we can find, maybe 5 or 10 million, where we can probably loan out short term or give us grants to local businesses. And maybe we work this through scrutiny going forward and see what we can come up with. But yeah, so that was my point. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no other speakers. Councillor Boker, you reserved your right.
Yes, I did, Mr. Mayor, but I have nothing else to add.
Thank you. I call on Councillor Barclay to sum up then. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm stunned that Councillor Mayor, having criticised us for not having enough money and using reserves, he now wants to actually use more of our money. The money we hold, roughly 60 million, as shown in the report, is held on behalf of Leicestershire County Council, the Fire and Police Authority. We just, having given out 43 million to local businesses, we just simply don't have enough money to indulge in a grant scheme other than what has been produced by central government. We do, as you know, provide grants and to charities, and we are continuing to do that. But it shows a complete lack of understanding of the finances, quite frankly, if somebody is saying that we've got money to dish out in grants and we don't need it back. Given what you've just said about the budget, it's nonsense.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to make a point of clarification, please.
If it's just a note of clarification, that's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did say that we could loan out money as well as grants. So I think I just want to make that point clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. And of course, the government is producing centrally business loans to all businesses which they can apply to. So that's the answer to that. But I commend you to note this report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And now putting the motion to the vote. Councillors, when the poll appears on your screen, please select the option indicated in the way in which you wish to vote.
Okay, I'm just about to launch the poll and you have 1 minute. Thank you. Got 30 seconds left. Okay, I'm about to end the poll, and if Councillor Bentley can indicate verbally how he wishes to vote, please.
For Karen.
Okay, so based on that, I am reading that 38 for, and we have 13 abstentions. We are missing one member in that on that basis, though. Has everybody voted? It is. Can Simon also confirm my understanding? So it's 38 and 13 abstentions.
Yes, thank you, Karen. That is correct based on Councillor Bentley's vote. Thank you.
Thank you. The motion is carried then. Thank you. I'll move on. Item 6.4, report of the Independent Remuneration Panel in respect to the allowances paid to members of Charlwood Borough Council for 2021-22. I call on Councillor Smidowicz to propose the item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, for the reasons set out in the report, I move the recommendation that are also set out in the report.
Councillor Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I second this report and reserve my right. Thank you.
Right. If any councillor would like to speak, please press the raise hand feature in Zoom. I have no indication that's going to happen, so I come back to Councillor Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nothing further to add.
Thank you. Councillor Smidowicz, to
Yes.
sum up.
Very briefly, Mr. Mayor, I would like to thank the three members of the remuneration panel for their very thoughtful consideration of the regulations that are outlined on page 104. And I hope that members agree that this decision not to increase our remuneration is the right decision to make under the current circumstances. I'd like to think we'd be in a different situation next year, but it's the right decision for this year. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Now putting the motion to the vote. Councillors, when the poll appears on your screen, select the option indicated the way which you wish to vote.
Okay, I'm about to launch the poll and you have 1 minute. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to actually end the polling now because I actually think everybody has voted. Can Councillor Bentley let us know how he's voting, please?
For, Karen.
So based on that, we've got 51 votes for and no votes against.
I agree with that. Thank you, Karen. So 51 for, no against, no abstentions.
Thank you. The motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 7, calling references. There are no calling references from scrutiny. Position statement, no request for position statement has been received. Motions on notice, no request for a motion on notice have been received. Item 10, questions on notice. As a reminder, the questions that councillors have submitted and the answers to them are in the supplementary pack. I will call on these councillors who have indicated they wish to ask a supplementary question. Supplementary question must relate directly to inclusively to the question submitted, and any other supplementary question will not be permitted. Each councillor will have 1 minute to ask their supplementary question, and the councillor responding will also be able to speak for 1 minute. Item 10.1, section 106 monies. Councillor Taylor, I understand you've got no supplementary question. Can I just confirm that?
That's correct, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 10.2, Charlwood Paralympics. Councillor Popley, would you like to ask your supplementary question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make it brief, I promise. Thank you to the leader and the lead member for their kind response. In light of this information, can I please ask them both that we and officers meet outside of this meeting to discuss how we can work with existing partners to relaunch a similar event in the future and other disabled activities to raise the profile in Charlwood. Thank you.
Councillor Harper-Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Popley, yes, of course.
Thank you. Item 10.3, virtual meetings legislation. Councillor Draycott, would you like to ask your supplementary question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The LGA on the 15th of February have stated the government will change the law to make virtual meetings permanent, but is to consult all councillors first. My question is, Will all consultation be inclusive? In other words, will all councillors be involved, which hasn't always been the case in the past regarding consultation in general, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan, would you like to respond?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much, Councillor Draycott. The timetable set out by the Prime Minister this afternoon, I think helps to explain why the government is now looking to extend the current provision for online meetings. There has been a commitment from the Secretary of State as of a couple of weeks ago that all future briefings will be open to all group leaders. So, for instance, the one that took place last week where the comments from the government about extending the online meeting, I think the invites went to Councillor Meir and also Councillor Needham. I specifically asked for Councillor Needham on the basis that obviously, whilst not technically a group, I think it's fair that she was invited. So hopefully that does mean that responses will be able to be garnered from not only the ruling party in each of those councils, but actually the opposition groups as well, to make sure that the responses are full and also adequate as far as supporting councillors and their wishes to participate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you. Item 11, minute references. There are no minute references. Urgent executive decision exempt from calling. This is a report to inform the council of decisions which was exempt from calling in accordance with Scrutiny Committee Procedure 11.9. If any councillors would like to ask a question, please indicate your wish to do so, pressing the raise hand feature on Zoom. I don't see any, so I'll move on. Item 13, nominations of Mayor-elect 2021-22. Nominations for the elect of the council year 2021-22. Please indicate by raising your hand. And I guess it's Councillor Hamilton to do that.
Thank you, Mayor. I nominate Councillor Paul Baines for Mayor-elect.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very happy to second Councillor Paul Baines as the Mayor-elect for 2021-22.
Thank you. Now putting the motion to the vote. Councillors, when the poll appears on your screen, please select the option indicating the way which you would like to vote. I think we're getting used to this now. We're over to Karen.
Okay, we're about to launch the poll and we have 1 minute, but if I feel we can shorten it, I will do. Thank you. Okay, so I think everybody has voted now, so I'm going to end the polling. Can I ask that Councillor Bentley indicates verbally how he votes?
For Karen.
Thank you. Now I'm going to end the polling and share the result. So I have 49 for and actually 2 abstentions.
I agree with that, Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the motion is carried. Councillor Baines, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Hamilton, for proposing me, and Councillor Taylor for seconding me, and thanks to everyone else who voted for me. I know I was one of the abstentions. I thought it would be churlish to vote for myself, but thanks very much to the majority of people. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Item 14, nomination of Deputy Mayor-elect 2021-22. Nomination for Deputy-elect for the Council year 2021-22. Councillor Morgan.
Mr. Mayor, it gives me great pleasure to propose that Councillor Tillotson be nominated as Deputy Mayor-elect for the 2021 and 2022 Council year.
Thank you. Councillor Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It gives me equal pleasure to second that nomination. Thank you.
Okay, this might be the last voting thing we're doing tonight. Councillors, when the poll appears on your screen, please select the option indicated the way that which you would wish to vote. Karen.
Thank you. I'm about to launch the poll now. Okay, so we've just gone past the 30-second, now 40-second point. I'm actually going to end the polling now because can I ask that Councillor Bentley indicates verbally how he wishes to vote?
Yeah, 4, Karen, thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to end the polling and share the result. So based on that, we have 49 for and 2 abstentions.
I agree, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So motions is carried. And could I ask Councillor Tillotson just to say a few words?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you everyone for voting for me. It's a great honour and privilege to be chosen as Deputy Mayor. You can probably tell by my accent that I wasn't born or brought up here, but I have chosen to live here. I've lived in Charnwood for over 40 years and I brought my 2 children up here. I'm proud to call Charnwood my home and I look forward to supporting Councillor Baines in his role as Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I move on now to item 15, appointment to... Oh, first of all, I must say congratulations from myself. That was wrong of me not to go through to that and say thank you to everyone. And I'm sure you'll look forward to those 2 years. And they're remarkable years to be involved in Charnwood. And I'm sure that it's going to be easier than I've had it in terms of the pandemic. And I look forward to seeing some events coming forward. Thank you. I'm now moving on to item 15, appointments to committees. I'm not aware of any proposed changes to membership of committees. If anybody has, could they just show quickly? No, thank you. That's it for tonight. Could I just thank everybody? I think it's gone quite smoothly in terms of how we've delivered this meeting. And in some ways, I think it's for the future as well, that 1 or 2 of these meetings could probably stay this way. And it will be interesting to see what government do about it. With that, I just got one note to give you. The note of the extraordinary council meeting scheduled for the 29th of March has been postponed, and all councillors will be advised of the new date shortly. In the meantime, please be aware that the technical briefing scheduled for Wednesday the 24th this week of February has also been postponed. Details will follow shortly. Therefore, the next scheduled council meeting after that will be 26th of April 2021. Can I just thank you again for very, very kind to the Mayor tonight. It was, I think it went quite smoothly. So enjoy whatever you've got to do for the remainder of the evening and take care. And it's going the right way, I believe, in terms of the vaccinations and such. So I welcome